In June of 2024, the Historical Society of Old Yarmouth presented She Said Yes, an exhibit of our collection of vintage wedding gowns. 35 dresses with accessories were on display. Donated by one of our members, this beautiful brown plaid silk dress was worn in 1862 by her great-great-grandmother Rebecca Crocker of Barnstable at her marriage to Edward Hinckley. Crocheted buttons, silk fringe, and a large collar elevate this dress to something very special. In the corner of the room is an elaborate blush silk gown from the 1870s, enhanced with bows, lace, pearl buttons, banding, pleats, and ruffles. It is topped with a veil of the period and is a beautiful ensemble. The next dress was headed for the dump because the owners did not know who would want it. Luckily, it came to us through a member who knew of our collection. The beading on the skirt had fallen off and was repaired by our team. This tiny dress was worn in 1885 by Adelaide Haynes of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Evoking Jane Austen, this simple cotton dress dates to the 1820s. It is hand embroidered and would have been worn with elbow-length gloves, a poke bonnet like you see here, and the bride would have had a fan. As we enter the main parlor, the first dress you see on the left is a very unusual and very small silk dress with wide lapels, puffed sleeves, rear bustle, and a lace front. It was worn by Laura Parmela of Canandaigua, New York in 1889, and the accessories you see all came with the dress: gloves, fan, veil, and shoes. Note the waist on this dress, which is the tiniest in our collection. The entire collection was saved very lovingly by her family. Sea Captain's daughter, Mabel Emery, married Leon Hall in Dennis in December of 1899. Her beautiful dress is made of silk satin with pleated chiffon insets on the bodice and skirt. Pearl trim enhances the skirt edge, including the long train, bodice edge, neckline, and sleeves. This gown was made from a shimmering moire silk with lace panels running down the front of the skirt, which is gathered using cartridge pleating over the bustle. The extra tiny bodice, which required a custom-made mannequin, has a 20-inch waist and laces up the front. Christine Huntington Starr wore it in 1888 at her home wedding near Hartford, Connecticut. Here you can see the light shining and shimmering on the silk. This dress is quite fragile. Yarmouth bride Isabel Taylor wore this everyday wool dress in 1895 to her own wedding. She enhanced it with a delicate crocheted collar. Many brides could not afford a dress. They could only wear once, so they wore their best dress on that day. Heading into the captain's study, our first dress on the left was cherished by the owner, a factory worker who saved her pennies to afford it for her 1901 wedding, and never wore it again. It was made from a lavender cotton twill with a Canadian smocked silk inset in the bodice and silk puffs at the end of each sleeve, topped with velvet cuffs. Yarmouth bride Mary Jane Ferguson wore this dress in 1900. It is made of light beige wool with a silk inset in the bodice decorated with brown hand-stitched cording and is enhanced with silk fringe and a sash. Also a Yarmouth bride, Ethel Darling wore this Edwardian dress at her 1922 wedding. The dress features layers of lace, a high neckline, and several crocheted baubles on the front. The sheer sleeves show off the lovely embroidery. Entering the dining room, we see 4 lovely Edwardian gowns. Dating to about 1910 is a tiny Edwardian dress made of silk satin with silk fringe on the sleeves, bodice, and skirt. The neckline features silk ribbon roses carefully tucked into the folds. This next gown was worn in 2 weddings, by Tekla in 1910 and then by her granddaughter in 1981. It's in a classic Edwardian style. Here you see a photo of Tekla and her husband from 1910. A champagne-colored wedding gown, typical of the Edwardian period and beautifully embroidered throughout. Many tiny snaps, a recent innovation, are at the back, waist, and front. It was worn in 1910. A favorite, this ecru silk satin gown ends in an unusual fishtail train. The entire gown is richly adorned with lace bows and a wide waist-defining self sash. A parted hem displays the lace underslip at the bottom. This dress dates to about 1910 or 15. Our rear exhibit room features 3 showcases of accessories, vintage invitations, and photographs. On the wall, we have displayed a variety of silk vests men wore to their wedding in the mid-1800s and were lovingly saved by their families. This 1918 dress has it all. Tiny sequins to catch the light, lace peeking out from folds in the skirt, and a silk chiffon over jacket with pearl trim and ruching on the front and sleeves. Yarmouth's Faith Pereira wore this gown, though not on the occasion of her marriage. It is full length with a champagne-colored silk slip and delicate lace overlay with a very short train. Made of the finest and lightest white silk with a chiffon and lace overlay with 3/4 length sleeves, this gown dates to the 1910s. A narrow train attached to the back waistline is finished with a soft bow, and the tulle cap is decorated with tiny fabric flowers. When Helen Kroll of Yarmouth married Albert Kelly in 1920, she was wearing this simple net-lined silk dress with a wide embroidered collar. The floral pattern is repeated on the sash and sleeves. A simple 1929 silk dress with floral appliques at the neck, enhanced with inset sequins. Delicate pin tucks add definition to the waist and hip area. An unusual robe-to-style dress in silk and lace from about 1925 with hoops at the hips that create a fuller-looking skirt. An audience favorite, this special dress of silk georgette has multiple flounces on the short sleeves and on the 6 inserted skirt gussets, giving it lots of style and movement. It is topped with a cloche hat, all dating from the 1920s. As we enter the 1930s, the first gown you see is in a rich, creamy velvet worn by Leah Hennessy in 1935. The top of each sleeve has a row of tight accordion pleats that add volume and drama to the otherwise simple lines of the dress. Next is a fitted ivory satin gown with a fashionably long extended train from 1936. 3 prominently placed beaded flowers add a surprise element to the high ruched neckline, and the back is closed with long row of satin buttons. The long veil is topped with a silk band decorated with flowers. The satin dress in the corner is made from a synthetic fabric with a pleated scrollwork neckline. The scrollwork design is repeated in the many bows that ornament the full skirt and train. Striking in its simplicity and elegance, this next gown is of bias cut and fitted, crafted from liquid satin in silk. The draped neckline, shimmering fabric, pointed sleeves, and dramatically long train evoke a Hollywood-inspired silhouette. A vision in white, this sheer organdy wedding dress with short sleeves and a long train was worn in 1939 in Brockton. It includes a silk underslip with slim straps. The bride is accompanied by a flower girl. Moving into the 1940s and 50s, this first dress was sewn by the bride for her own 1949 wedding in New Jersey. The couple spent their honeymoon on Cape Cod. Worn in 1956, this cream-colored silk shantung gown with pleated details at the neck and hip line displays an understated elegance so typical of the 1950s. There is a long train, a full skirt, and that is accentuated with a stiff petticoat. The donor is a member of our society. A beautiful 1949 wedding gown with a very long detachable train in Skinner satin and lace with puff sleeves and a striking beaded neckline. Detachable lower sleeves were added for church and removed at the reception. The accompanying green dress was worn by the bride's sister, her maid of honor. Our last room brings us into the modern era. On the left is a simple cotton dress so popular during the 1970s when some brides chose natural simplicity. Covered with vertical and horizontal pin tucks, the skirt and sleeves have insets of a simple flowered cotton lace. This unusual dress was made from cotton organdy with a flocked floral design. It has a full tiered skirt and off-center collar and dates to the 1950s. The epitome of 1960s style, this gown, fashioned from cotton, has an empire waist accentuated with a pearl beaded bow. Floral lace appliques add interest and enhance the neckline. Yarmouth bride Carolyn married in the fall of 1977. Her gown was in the prairie style so typical of the 1970s with a high collar, sheer front inset, and bishop sleeves. Designed by John Burbage for Priscilla's of Boston, this gown was given to the bride by the designer and worn in a 1986 Victorian-inspired wedding. It is fashioned of blush silk and heavily embellished with sequins, beading, bows, lace, and ruffles. It is beautiful. Our final dress is an ecru silk with a wide shawl collar and full skirt. This dress might have been worn by a bride looking for a more simple style or perhaps on the occasion of a second marriage. We hope you have enjoyed this virtual exhibit. Thank you for joining us.